Do you ever notice that some broadcasters don't just call the game? They actually become the soundtrack for the moment, really helping us capture the drama. When you have somebody like Vin Scully who can do just an amazing job of capturing everything that's happening during a baseball game, and then you take his voice and you put it into a fictional story like they did in For Love of the Game, just an amazing thing and how much it can elevate that story that's being told. Or maybe it's Bob Unger when he steals the show in Major League. Or having Jim Nance be the soundtrack to a movie like Tin Cup. Because when the voice is right, it doesn't just describe the moment, it elevates it. And today, we've got a story about a microphone, a moment, and what it means to be able to step into that role. This is Tabletop SportCast. Welcome to the Tabletop SportCast. I'm your host, James Cast, and today is January 11th, 2026, and this is episode 237. Today, we'll be sitting down with Marc Unger and Ron Juckett, and we're going to discuss a project that Marc is working on. My planned topic for today was going to be the winter show, and we talked about this last week in episode 236, my 2026 annual plan that every quarter I was going to kick off with like a seasonal show and just kind of run down what I've been planning on working on, go a little bit more in depth on some of the projects to give you an idea about how I'm planning on executing on those projects. And we'll do all that next week. But Marc gave me a call earlier this week and we started talking about this project that he's got. And it just felt like the timing was right. So we decided to get an interview recorded, get that out. And it's a chance to get Ron Juckett back into podcast mode. And it was really a pleasure to get a chance to talk to Ron as well. So, and Marc, and really cover this really exciting project that Marc is kicking off. So we're going to get into all that in just a minute. As always, if you'd like to reach out and talk about the podcast or talk about any of your projects, hit me up with an email at tabletopsportcast@gmail.com. Follow me on Facebook and go actually follow the page if you aren't already, facebook.com/tabletopsportcast. And of course, if you'd like to help support the podcast, you can go over to patreon.com/tabletopsportcast for $1 a month. Really does go a long way to helping to offset costs for the podcast. All right. We're going to do away with a lot of our other formalities that we typically do at the beginning of an episode and get right into the interview with Marc and Ron. All right. Special interview tonight. Going to be sitting down with two gentlemen from our community, Marc Unger and Ron Juckett. Some of you are going to obviously know Ron from another podcast, Digital to Dice, that he had been a long-time member of.
Almost 6 years.
Over 6 years. It's crazy. Ron and I had a chance to, I made one brief appearance on Digital to Dice a couple years ago. It was during Gridiron Games when Dave was doing his live broadcast from Canton, Ohio. Ron was on the line and I had a chance to just jump on real quick. But Ron, let's let everyone kind of catch up with you. It's been I guess a little over a year, right?
Not quite, I think.
Just about.
I think it's
Yeah,
about 9 months, yeah.
About 9 months, okay. I remember it was like right before the Digital to Dice convention last year that I think you had decided to kind of step away. So what have you been up to?
Well, I still have my own YouTube channel, Retro Sports Network, and we did the 1956 baseball season, that, and the Yankees won that, and we've just started 1986, and every once in a while I'll do Uncle Ron's Thoughts. So not quite a podcast, not quite a regular basis, but my take on 10 to 15 to a half hour on a topic or a mailbag. So I'm still, heavily invested in the community, still doing some back end stuff for Dave and that, but away from the weekly grind of trying to produce a podcast along with my own content.
Yeah. And I think I just saw just this week, right? I think you had a feature article in Jamie Marshall's
Sports Gaming Journal. Yep. He's kind of moving some of his stuff to Substack. I think some of those will get put into a PDF for that. We talked about some things. And so, yes, I just did an article on, playing that Heartbreak Project or season or what have you. And for me, Mr. Met fan over there in the far corner.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's no heartbreak for me.
Yeah, I know it wasn't for you. Thanks. As playing that 86 season, knowing how it ended in real life.
Yeah.
And again, being part of the reason doing that was when I did 88 a couple years ago, we got the Reds and the Red Sox in the World Series. I mean, it wasn't the Mets got swept, as a matter of fact, by the Reds, which was a huge surprise. And the Red Sox and Twins played an absolute 7-game classic. And so here we are. This would have been my senior year of high school. So Here we are. It's game 7 of a classic World Series. We had one game won on a walk-off 15th inning sac fly, for goodness sakes. And so the Red Sox carry a 5-run lead into the bottom of the 8th inning with Lee Smith in their bullpen, with Mike Boddicker in the bullpen, with Bob Blinking Stanley in the bullpen, and lose. Thanks to partially a misplayed fly ball by Dwight Evans.
Oh.
If you ever had a case where someone on your table or computer has made some sort of egregious mistake, the next time that their name pops up in conversation, not necessarily for gaming, you go, I can't believe that happened. I can't believe he did that. And you're going, what? So yeah, if I could survive trying to smile through Rob Murphy slamming the door in the top of the 9th, then I think I can handle 86.
There you go. Yeah, I just had one of those heartbreak things. I was replaying the 93-94 Rangers playoffs for hockey and got to the conference finals against the Devils and lost in 6. So.
Oh, wow.
It doesn't always go our way, does it?
No, it doesn't. But I mean, that's part of I think the charm of the hobby is you just never know.
You just never know
what's going to happen. So,
I just realized we have 3 diehard Giants fans.
That's true.
That is true.
In this conversation, don't we?
Yeah, and 2 Mets fans.
And 2 Mets fans.
Yeah, that's nice, dear.
But I'm also an Orioles fan. In fact, I'd say these days I'm probably more of an Orioles fan than I am a Mets fan.
Okay.
Well, you
got Giants forever.
But you got Pete Alonso now forever, right?
That's true.
I'm looking forward to that, actually. Yeah. I mean, the huge billboards, digital billboards all over Baltimore, downtown, about Pete Alonso and welcome Polar Bear and all that stuff. Like,
there's some stability now cool. with that franchise. Now that the old man's dead.
Now that Angela's talking about, well, he sold the team.
Yeah. Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, it's owned by a guy named David. I'm blanking on his last name, but he's been a very sort of. In fact, it's kind of funny because when he first took over the team, everybody was really excited. This was 2024.
Right.
And, they had such a good team. They had made the playoffs the year before. They made it in 2024. And so this past season, they had a bobblehead night for the owner. Now, if you know, this season, the Orioles completely tanked it. And so the bobblehead night was not a great success. There was a lot of thrown bobbleheads.
I bet there was.
Yeah. Man.
Yeah, bad mistake, I think, for the ownership to have thought that was a good idea, until you actually win a playoff game.
Yeah, exactly.
The amount of grief today on social media with Alex Bregman going to the Cubs.
Yes.
Sure. In Red Sox Nation.
It's a good day for Chicago yesterday. But...
$135 million for 5 years to a 32-year-old infielder.
It's a little high.
Well, maybe that's a bullet dodged.
Yeah, I think for the Red Sox it might be.
Yeah.
So, Marc, we got a chance to hear about some of your fandom there, but tell us a little bit about yourself as you're kind of new to the podcast, even though we've been chatting for a couple of years now, but on and off. So just give us a little idea about who you are and what you're bringing to the table today.
Well, I mean, I've been in the hobby literally since I was 7 years old.
Nice.
And sitting on the floor with my dad, playing a 2-dice, what he called dice baseball, where like a 1-1 was a ground out, a 2-1 was a fly out, a 3-1 was a single. And I played that and kept statistics. And, even though I think one year, I would play like a 30-game season or something. And I remember one year my home run leader was Manny Trio, which tells you how accurate a 2-dice game that, is going to be like that. But it got me hooked. I mean, even games like basket and electric football, like I would always find ways to make it about real players. And then eventually I found APA, a little bit of Strat. I remember in camp, although back when I was a kid, I preferred APA. Then I really got into Status Pro, pursue the pennant. But my point really is I know there's a lot of people who they get into the hobby for a while and then they disappear for long periods of time. And then, they get older and they kind of find it again. For me, it's been pretty much a constant. Like even, I'm a longtime comedian and an actor. And, even when I was on the road, working the improv in St. Louis or whatever, I would bring some of these games with me, to give me something to do in the hotel room. People in the hobby now, if you might know me as Marc Unger, but you also might know me as Thespian Series, because we have a YouTube channel for our show. My wife and I produce a show called Thespian that's on Amazon. It's on Tubi. It's actually on quite a few platforms worldwide. And I haven't started my own Marc Unger sports hobby YouTube channel, but it's something I plan to do actually, within the next couple of weeks.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And I'll start playing games on there and, have Ron on, have you on, we'll talk about stuff. And also it'll be a way to promote, this kind of, I guess, big thing that we're about to talk about, which is this documentary that I'm working on. So what happened with that was where that came from. About, I want to say it was 4 years ago, maybe 5. It was during the pandemic. At some point, I remember I found the Digital to Dice podcast. And I started listening to that. And first of all, I was thrilled. I didn't know that there was anything like that related to our hobby. I had no idea, none. So just being able to hear content about, these games that I play was really great. And back then in particular, each week, each episode, they would talk about, the inner workings of action PC football, or, it was very game oriented.
Yeah.
And you learned a lot about very specific games. They never trashed one game and praised another game. It wasn't that kind of thing. But it was really informative. And I hear Dave Gardner and I hear Ron Juckett, and there's just these two voices that I liked. And then at some point I went to Ron's YouTube channel and I saw Ron broadcasting a game. And Ron should be the one to talk about this part of it, but Ron deals with some severe physical limitations, and his positivity on the podcast and on his YouTube channel, there was a disconnect from me. But I mean that in the best way possible. I basically fell in love with this guy. I was like, this is an amazing human being. So anyway, I had this idea of doing a documentary. At the time, it was the original idea, and I went on the Digital to Dice podcast to talk about this. Yeah. And again, this was about, I want to say 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago, maybe. I wanted to do a documentary about our sports gaming hobby. But I remember specifically saying on the podcast that the big issue that I was having in terms of putting it together was what's the story? What's the through line? I've been a filmmaker for 25, 30 years. I mean, yeah, I guess almost 30 years. And I know how to tell a story. And I know that the best documentaries, it can't just be, shots of, middle-aged white guys sitting at the Holiday Inn conference room rolling dice,
No.
I mean, we'll think that's really cool, but it won't have any traction.
Yeah.
What I want to do is to tell the story of, a little bit about the history of the hobby, of course, and APA and how national pastime led to APA, which led to this, which led to that. And the mechanics, but really it's about the people. But again, I was banging my head. What's the story? What's the story? What's the story? And, it sat in the back of my brain for a few years, and I was making Thespian and, working on other projects. And I think what happened was one day I was talking to Ron. We were like messaging each other on Facebook, and maybe we were talking about his broadcasting or something like that. And I think Ron is a tremendous broadcaster.
Yeah.
I think, the way he's able to create these imaginary events and do it so quickly. If he's playing action PC baseball, the line will read something like, Evans dropped the ball. But Ron will color that in a way that's really clever, really effective, really funny. And he does it while interacting with a chat, with an audience, which is not something your average broadcaster has to do, right? So that makes it even more challenging. So, I've always really been impressed. There's a lot of guys out there who broadcast their games, and some of them are very, very good.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm really good. Al Red Sox fan with boxing, Dave Gardner with hockey is particularly good. But I think just broadly, Ron, I personally think he's the best.
Well, and going on that too, like Ron, I mean, I know like Retro Sports Network is, something you had started, but even before that, like sports reporting is not something that has been unfamiliar to you, correct?
No. Sports has been a big part of my life always.
Yeah.
And it never really bothered me that I couldn't play. My birth father was a huge sports fan. Was one of those people that would have the football card sheets on a Saturday or Sunday, and so whatever the game was on ABC and the double, he had money on the pool, and so
I forgot about those cards. Yeah, my dad had those too.
So they've been pitching Budweiser to me since I was 3 years old, and I've never had one, to be honest. And so it was always something that was on in the house, and there's a buzz in a crowd. If you ever get something, if you're kind of half asleep or whatever, and you put a game on, and it could be it worked for years for Braves games on TBS. Like, why in the world do I want to watch the Braves and the Pirates doubleheader, TBS, America's team, against two teams that aren't going to win 100 games combined, let alone, contend for a playoff spot? But the crowd gets you going, and the setup gets you going, and we haven't seen Pascual Perez. Pascual Perez found his way to the stadium. What's he going to do tonight? It's so that interested me a lot. And so from a very young age, it wasn't just Jim Rice or Terry Bradshaw or John Havlicek. It was Keith Jackson and Joe Garagiola and Brent Musburger and all those, because it was their job to get you ready for what it is you were about to see. And to steal a line from Al Michaels, paraphrase a line, there isn't any greater drama, pardon me, Mark, than live professional sports, because you never know what you're going to see. And I think, to me, that's the hook. You do not know from day in, day out, what you could see, what you will see, and that. And so at the start of that was, that's how I got into it.
And I think that's the part that carries over to the hobby too, right? Like,
absolutely.
We're not scripting anything, right? This is all stuff that is happening. And as random as it is with the roll of dice or the flip of cards, like, it still is you don't know what the next action is going to
Right.
be, and that brings that drama back to us, right?
And I think over time, you realize if you're brave enough to hit that live button on YouTube or your phone and do that, it's all improv.
Yeah.
You might be given a line of text with a stat line or something like that. You're familiar with the rules, so it's not there's a small safety net there, but there really isn't. And you got to figure out the great games are easy to do because everyone's swept up in the moment of what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
But when the Cubs put a 10 spot up in the second inning, how the hell am I going to entertain you for the next 45 minutes? Because the game's over. The game is absolutely over. And if you were doing this by yourself, you'd zoom it or put it away till you felt better. I've got a handful of an audience who is looking forward to this. You got to entertain them somehow, some way. And so,
yeah. So Marc, that idea of like what you were talking about of finding that thread for this documentary that was becoming a bit of a passion project for you.
Yeah.
I think you're right. Like documentaries that really get us and bring us in have to have that thread. And it generally is going to be that human interest story, right? Because if it's just like, here's what it is, like to your point about a bunch of guys hanging out in a convention hall, it's not going to really be anything that people are going to be that interested in. But
I mean, yeah, look, let's face it. We're not spelunkers. You know what I mean? There's nothing that like immediately physically or visually interesting about what we do.
no.
So yeah, as I was saying, Ron and I were talking, thinking about his broadcasting, and all of a sudden, like this bell went off. That light bulb thing. All the cartoon stuff. I happen to be friends with a guy in 2013. I was one of the pregame show hosts on a radio station in Baltimore, 98 Rock, for the Ravens, pre and sometimes post game, and which was kind of funny in and of itself because I hate the Ravens. I'm a Giants fan, and the Ravens beat us in 2000.
Yeah,
so I would have to pretend that I really cared about the Ravens, which I because I'm an actor, I could do very successfully as long as my checks kept clearing.
But the Trent Dilfer bobblehead voodoo doll is something that's one of your prized possessions.
Right. But I became friendly with my co-host, who's a guy named Brett Hollander. Brett is currently one of the play-by-play guys for the Baltimore Orioles. So the idea that hit me was, what if I could arrange for Ron to be able to broadcast a Major League Baseball game for an inning or two? And before I continue the story, I think this might be a good point. If you agree, James.
Yeah.
If Ron, can you explain to the audience exactly what it is you have and you've had it your whole life, and just tell us about your condition or whatever the word is.
It's not a disease. It's not something that progresses. The name of it is arthrogryposis multiplex congenita. That's a lot of Scrabble points.
It is.
Essentially, it's Latin for your limbs are frozen. Every joint in my body, except for my jaw and spine, is literally frozen. The range of motion is extremely limited, from 0 to maybe 10 degrees. And so no use of a hand, no use of a leg, no use of an ankle. My hips aren't in socket. So birth defect for sure. If you're familiar with the story of Love Canal, then that's right state, wrong end.
Well, that gets into a whole nother part of the documentary.
So that's what happened to me. The jaw works, obviously, and the spine works. So I have some torso movement as well. And so we've just kind of made do for the last 54 years with that, and with those, trying to deal with the challenges that come with that. Again, it's not, they didn't think I'd live to be 30.
Wow.
Yeah. So knowing that, knowing that broadcasting is Ron's dream.
Yeah.
That's something that, if conditions had been different, it's probably the occupation you would have pursued, right? Right, Ron?
Yeah, I mean, there were definite parental-child arguments about going to Syracuse when I was in high
Because of the communications.
because the
And
communications
actually,
department, yeah.
one of Brett's colleagues, what's his name? Kevin Brown, who's sort of the play-by-play guy for the Orioles now. He went to Syracuse.
Looking to be the play-by-play guy for NBC this year, if the article's an awful announcing it. Yeah, because they're doing 20 games over the network.
That's right.
Anyway, yes, I would have had a letter of recommendation from the Vermont State Commissioner of Education to get into Syracuse. It snows a lot in Syracuse in the wintertime, which I didn't quite realize. And was pretty much told that you're not leaving the state because because it would have been too far. And it was absolutely the right thing for them to say, you can't do that.
Yeah.
That's not an argument. This isn't the therapist couch and all that. But someone thought I had the potential to do that.
Yeah. So I reached out to Brett. I told him Ron's story. He found it fascinating. He watched some of Ron's stuff on YouTube, and of course, the first thing he said was, "Hey, he sounds like Vin Scully." Because you do have that sort of quality to your voice, and it's not
intentional.
I was going to say I was going to say that I was going to defend you. I was going to. I mean, yes, he's not doing an impression. It's not an affectation, because even just listening to you now, it just so happens that you have a very similar. I guess would it be timbre? I guess is or tone. I guess for lack whatever that vocal word is.
He's from the Bronx, and I'm from Glens Falls.
Well, but it's not. It's more than that, though.
Right.
It's literally, it's your register, it's your cadence.
I think it's self-training to do whatever it is that I do. Obviously, Vinny was my idol, and in those formative years, it was him and Joe Garagiola on Saturday afternoons.
That's true. And look, close your eyes, and Kevin Brown is Joe Buck. I mean, there's, in fact, half the guys broadcasting baseball today are Joe Buck wannabes.
I don't know if he's with the Capitals or the Devils hockey team, but whoever the lead for that, I forget which one it is a Bob Costas clone.
Sure,
and of course they are, because that's the generation that we all grew up watching.
And then the question also becomes, how much of that is the broadcaster sort of, I mean, look, as a comedian, I have my influences. We all have our influences.
Sure.
So the question is, how much of that is the broadcaster sort of deliberately creating that voice and that persona, or is it the industry looking for those voices and finding people that seem to have those voices? So again, getting back to the piece, so I reached out to Brett. Brett loved the idea. And I realized that if we can pull this off, Ron's story, particularly ending with filming him broadcasting an inning or two of a Major League Baseball game, that now takes this documentary out of just the realm of the hobbyists and makes it an incredible human interest story about, and I've said this to Ron, so this is not new. I mean, I wrote this when I've been, sending out emails about the project. To me, the single most courageous, inspiring person I've ever met is Ron Juckett. I mean, Ron talked about, I can't remember exactly what you just said, Ron, but it's something like, we had to learn how to make do for 54 years.
Right.
I think that's what you said, which is such a beautifully simple way of saying, look, this is it. This is what I got. What am I supposed to do? And you've made the most of it. So ultimately, the Orioles said that because Ron is from Boston, or from Vermont, or lives in Vermont rather, and is such a huge Boston Red Sox fan, it would make more sense to reach out to the Red Sox. So Brett, and also the vice president of marketing for the Orioles, connected me to a guy named Colin Birch, who's the VP of broadcasting and marketing for the Red Sox. And, we'll wait and see how it plays out. I mean, I'm firmly convinced that we'll be able to make something happen.
Awesome.
There are some limitations in terms of what Ron is able to do. So he wouldn't be able to go into the studio or into the broadcast booth. It would have to be, he'd have to be able to broadcast it remotely, which is a doable thing. But I believe that at the very worst case, there would be some sort of segment with Ron done by the Boston Red Sox. I don't see them saying no to that.
Yeah.
I mean, Ron's story is too amazing and too positive, and it's exactly the kind of sports story. I mean, here's a guy who, forget about, he was not, I wasn't a very good athlete in school. You know what I mean? Like, I tried to play football, but I was terrible, so I became a broadcaster. No, Ron can't hold a football.
Yeah.
Forget throw a football. He can't hold one. He can't hold a baseball. He can't put a baseball glove on, probably, right?
Right.
I mean, and yet has such a strong passion for sports and for our hobby.
Right.
I mean, there's no better advocate or statesman for the hobby of sports gaming than Ron. I mean, and I think you've talked about this on your podcast or on your YouTube channel, Ron. When Ron plays cards and dice games or did play cards and dice games, he would have to take the dice with his mouth, spit them into a cup, basically shake the cup the way a dog shakes a bone, right?
Yeah.
Spill out the dice and then, figure it out from there.
Yeah, Ron, I mean,
what?
Yeah.
That's,
I mean, Ron, your journey with sports board gaming, I mean, it probably, like us, started at a very young age, right?
Theoretically, yeah. The first card and dice game I ever played was Championship Baseball. Came out in the early 80s. It was Topps and Milton Bradley, ML Players Association. So on the back of the cards were a line of stats and 2d6 grid that was wasn't supposed to be super accurate, but you could batch the cards to that, and I would play that. Micro League was the first real sim thing that I did, and someone got a couple season discs. I think I had 84 and 85 at one point, and the box score generator. We could make our own teams, and so that was pretty much the start of that. Reading the ads in the back of the sporting news, or in the magazines, you are the manager,
right?
I mean, highly effective for impressionable teenage kids to do that. And I don't know if my parents thought that it just wasn't going to be possible to do that because it wasn't encouraged. Baseball cards, obviously, and so, but the computer was the great equalizer because that was all accessible. It's a button press.
Right.
You don't have to be dexterous with it. You don't have to worry about, four button presses at once. You're using your head. And no one at the time was worried about whether it was a closed engine or an open engine. It was like, I can play the 86 Celtics against the 69-70 Knicks. That was great. So that was really the start of it. And the cards and dice stuff came when I didn't necessarily do all that well in college, but apparently it's paying off in the end, because in college I was introduced officially to all the strat sports and some basic APA when I was there, because that's what was around in the late 80s, early 90s. And so we played a ton of, someone had a handful of 80 strat football teams, the old Wide Boys. And we played a ton of that in that. So, yes, although academically I was not a gifted student, apparently it 30 some odd years later has paid off.
Well, there you go.
And so kind of like, even though I didn't have the kids like most of the people who do this as a teenager, life affects them one way or another, and they come back to it in their 40s and 50s. I got away for 7-8 years, and then was looking one day and found the Delphi boards.
Oh, okay.
That's how I got back into it. So around the turn, so in the last 25 years, back into it and stuff like that. So
And I think a lot of us like who are into the hobby, right? And cards and dice, and obviously a lot of us have also bridged into things like computer gaming, and some of us still stay into that quite a bit. But I don't think a lot of us look at it from the accessibility of cards and dice, and or the lack of, right?
Right.
And especially in your case, and lots of others, that all of a sudden, like, you've probably been able to capitalize as a huge sports fan on just all these evolutions in technology that have taken place, from starting with computers, and then getting into like the internet and the digital presence, and I'm guessing like eventually things like YouTube and podcasting to actually give you an avenue for this passion that you've had for your entire life.
It's amazing what PDFs can do. In all
It is
seriousness, because there's a limited amount of space of where you can do things if you have to play in front of a computer.
That's right.
And so being able to have multiple tabs open for whatever you're trying to do, or an Excel spreadsheet, makes that possible. When it wouldn't necessarily, you got to have a notebook here. You got to be able to do this. Yeah.
Yeah. And the things that we look at in terms of accessibility, like having dice rollers or having, automated score sheet kind of like programs, these are all things that just allowed you to actually be able to enjoy this hobby.
Right.
Yeah. That's great. Okay. So what else, like, Marc, do you think is going to be going into this documentary that you're going to do, with this nice thread around Ron, and I think kind of talking about his journey and everything that it touches within this hobby, right?
Well, I mean, before I even get into the specifics, which I will, of course, I think that a really important part of this is going to be the production values. You can go on YouTube right now. You can see little mini documentaries about the hobby or about this or about that, but the sound is usually pretty bad. Not enough attention was paid to the picture, or it was filmed with an iPhone 3 or 4 or whatever. What I would like to do is I would like to have a documentary that really is beautifully shot, beautifully lit, sounds good, uses a lot of interesting B-roll shots, B-roll meaning like the background shots you put over narration, with a strong professional narrator. Something that really elevates our hobby, because I think that's the way to, again, take it outside of our circle, but also potentially get younger people more interested in the hobby, because they're visually very creative. They grew up being able to edit films on their iPhones. So, these kids, they pay attention to that stuff.
I got a nephew who could do this professionally. That's how good he is. So,
and, I think, we need to be able to do that. So, there would be, it would be, there'd be a musical score. It would all be done right. And then the idea would be to really hone in on the personal stories. Ron's being, the overarching story, the main story. But there's a lot of other hobbyists out there, I'm sure, who have very interesting stories. And I would like to be able to hear their stories. How did you get into the hobby? The connection that you have, the emotional connection that you have to these sports and to these particular events. And, a lot of times these games were passed down to us, from our fathers or mothers, but probably more likely our fathers. So what's that relationship like? And, do you still have that strong relation? Because in my case, yes, my dad is the one that got me involved in, like I said, in this dice baseball game and then other games, but we had a terrible relationship. I mean, my dad was a monster in certain ways. I would like to touch on some of the mental health aspects of people in our hobbies. There are people, I think, who suffer from depression, who are gamers. There are people that deal with other challenges, divorces, deaths, widows, widowers. It's a very male hobby, but it's not exclusively male. But it's predominantly male. And I think that I would like to be able to talk to people in our hobby who are willing to open up about their vulnerabilities. I think, sometimes men, we get the short end of the stick sometimes when it comes to being allowed to be vulnerable. And, we can get into that whole angry white male thing, but I don't think that's the norm,
Yeah.
I don't think that's the average male. So I would like to touch on that. I would also like to interview game designers, and look, those of us in the hobby know that Keith Hernandez is famously a huge Strat fan. So I'd like to be able to interview him. Bob Costas. In fact, in some universe, I'd love to maybe get Bob Costas to do the narration. Tim Kirchian, who's a sports writer, prominent sports writer, huge Apple guy, I believe. I mean, and I'm sure that if I really dug in, I would find a lot more.
Doug Glanville too.
Who?
Doug Glanville had that great.
Yeah, I think I did know that actually. The guy played for the Cubs, right?
Cubs, Phillies.
And the Phillies, right.
Yeah, he had that piece on Major League, the MLB Network that they talked about him playing Strat and everything.
Kurt Schilling was a huge OOTP player.
Schilling, yeah.
And Schilling, he's another one. Yep. I don't think I want to talk to him, but but he is another one. I've already talked actually to a couple of game designers. I'm not going to start naming names because we're not really there yet, but they've expressed interest in being involved. They've expressed interest in helping to finance, because obviously it's easy to say we're going to make a documentary, but to do it right, to do it the way I'd like to do it. I also want to talk about the international, thing that happens in our. We've got people that live all over the world that play Strat or play Apple or play Pursue the Pennant or play this game or that game. I would like to be able to speak with them, and if that means a trip to, I'm not going to be. I don't think our budget's going to have 10 trips to Paris, but maybe one, and we try to meet a couple. Again, it's all about the visuals and the story, and not just guys rolling dice at the Holiday Inn.
Yeah.
Not there's anything wrong with that, because in some ways that is the backbone of the hobby. But I think there's so much more. Trying to think, is there anything else? Oh, I'd like to talk a little bit about the mechanics and the math. One of the challenges, a person that we have on board with us is a woman named Wynette Yao, and she's a friend of mine who is a documentary filmmaker, an award-winning documentary filmmaker. I've won awards for narrative stuff, but not documentaries. So she's going to be our supervising producer, and she's worked for Discovery and Nat Geo, and has a very, very full resume. So when I was kind of explaining the idea to her, she loves the idea. She loves Ron's story in particular, but she's having a really hard time understanding what this hobby even is.
Well, a couple of things pop into my head. First of all, we talk, make light of hit the buffet line at the Holiday Inn before you roll the football game. But it really is a brotherhood.
Yeah.
Because it is such it's a hobby. I mean, you really can't go to your spouse or your parent or whoever, someone who's not a gamer, and say, I can't believe what I just did. Because they're going to say, that's nice, dear. Nolan Ryan struck out 15 today. Nolan Ryan's in his 70s. He's not striking out anybody today. That sort of thing. And the other thing is, I think, as far as the mental health is concerned, it's comfort food to be able to, just like it would be to go back and pull out your favorite, let me age myself here, your favorite LP or your favorite CD and listen to those 10 to 12 tracks and know where you were, whatever it was. I mean, there are certain, one of my early CDs was Paul McCartney's Greatest Hits. This does relate. And so whatever the last song was on that CD, every time I hear it come up, I can hear, although it's not really happening, my CD player spin to stop it. And so that, whatever that comfort food is for that. So some people it's music, some people it's binge watching a TV show you've seen 17,000 times before.
Sure.
And others, it's these people brought me great joy. I want to spend some time with the 86 Mets.
We always talk about, a lot of us talk about the fact that a big driver in this hobby, right, is that nostalgia, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It's not so much, like, why are young people not into this hobby? It's probably because they're not into this hobby yet, right?
Yeah.
They haven't had a chance to miss the things that they grew up on. And you mentioned music, Ron, and like, we're at the age, all of us are about the same age, and we're seeing like a lot of those people that were icons or idols or whatever you want to call them, like, we're starting to lose a lot of them, right? And like,
yeah.
Ron's doing a tribute game every day, it feels like.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and it's not even so much like we were talking with a few of my friends, because Bob Weir obviously passed away last night, and an icon from the Grateful Dead. And it's not so much that like we're like harboring on the fact that we're losing these celebrities. It's just, it's what they represent, right? They represent these moments or like eras in our childhood or our teen years or our adulthood that we always want to go back to. And I think that's a big driver for this hobby, right? Is
absolutely
and that brings all kinds. And I think, you mentioned, Mark, like, we've got all kinds of people in here, and it's a spectrum of individuals who are dealing with all kinds of different things. They might be dealing with handicaps. They might be dealing with mental issues. They might be dealing with personal problems, but this hobby becomes like a release for all of us, right? And
yeah, I mean, I don't think, again, getting back to the documentary and what we would touch on that aspect of it, but I don't think, I also think something we haven't talked about. A lot of times I've heard it said, it's the nostalgia, it's the nostalgia, it's the nostalgia. But I also think it's a hobby designed for anybody who's interested in history, maybe specifically sports history, but history in general. I mean, when I replay seasons, some seasons I replay, whether it's 73 or 79 or, those seasons, 83, 80, whatever. There I'm doing it maybe for the nostalgia. But when I play 1949, I'm not doing it for the nostalgia,
right,
because I wasn't there, I am doing it to learn more about the history of that era. And not just, and so what I do is I'll look up historical events. And sometimes as I'm playing a game, because I usually, when I do a replay, I don't play every game. I'm not like, that guy Tebow. And when he plays APA, he plays every inning of every game.
Yeah.
So I'll pick and choose what games to play. But sometimes what I'll do is I'll look for interesting historical events that happen that day and play a game from that day. So I think that's something that you don't have to be a 55-year-old man to be turned on by.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that you can be a 20-year-old kid who's really into history and find the hobby that way, So
I mean, growing up, like, when I got into gaming in like, 8, 9, 10, right? Like, I still feel like I remember watching Ty Cobb play.
Right.
Clearly I do not, but I feel like I've been, watching Ty Cobb play for my entire life, right? And I haven't, other than on Cards and Dice.
I find it interesting that a lot of the guys, like, I grew up watching baseball, kind of mid-70s on, early to mid-70s on. And there were guys there who were still hanging around that I remember vaguely. Well, Willie Mays was one of them, of course, but Willie Mays, we all know how great he actually was, right?
Right.
But, guys like Harmon Killebrew, guys like Brooks Robinson, there's some pictures that come to mind, like Sam McDowell. His name just popped into my head. Mickey Lolich. These are guys that I remember Mickey Lolich getting traded to the Mets or signing with the Mets. I think it was like 76, maybe. I think it might have been 76. And everyone being really excited. And I'm like, well, who the hell's Mickey Lolich? But if you're old enough to go back into the 60s, then you get a real sense of why Brooks Robinson is Brooks Robinson, Mickey Lolich, Harmon Killebrew, and on and on and on. So for me, I like that. I like that I'm learning more about players whose names I know, and I know they're good. I know they're in the Hall of Fame, but I don't realize how dominant they are until I see them play in the seasons that are really their prime seasons. Frank Robinson, another example.
These games have their own language. You can instantly look at an APA card or a Strat card or a History Maker baseball card and immediately tell what the player is capable of doing.
Yeah.
And so once you know the language of however it is you want to play, you can plug whatever you like into it. And I think I'll probably do a stream between the conference championship games and the Super Bowl. Usually it's 2nd and 10 I play it with. And play it. And although I've watched no football at all this year, I'll be able to figure out how to run it just because I know how to run the game. And
Right.
so the game kind of tells you, I don't think I'll go for it as much on 4th down as modern coaches tend to do. But in all seriousness, it tells you how to play the teams. And you get a good appreciation of what they're doing today. Same, I'm a huge fan of Strat basketball. Don't ask me why. I don't watch a lot of basketball. It's probably my least favorite of the big four, but I love playing Strat basketball. And so I'll pull out a couple of the modern teams because I buy the game every year. And again, I'm not lost when I'm playing it because I understand the language.
And I think that's one of the challenges with the documentary, and one of the things I want to do, and I was kind of saying this before when I was talking about Wynette Yao's involvement, the thing that she doesn't understand is, well, how does this work? What do you mean you simulate games? What do you mean she doesn't get it. So I want people to understand that these cards, if we're talking about, or any open engine game,
right.
Yeah.
These cards, they're miraculous if you think about it. The fact that you can take a Mike Schmidt card, and if you roll enough times, the numbers that he hits are going to be similar to what he actually did that season. That to me is just magical. And I believe that will be magical to people who don't know about the hobby once they understand that aspect of it. You can watch, in fact, there is a documentary about pinball. Like, I've always been a huge pinball kid, growing up in Brooklyn, New York. I mean, we're, literally when Pinball Wizard came out. So I know some of the tricks of, how to lean a table and, how to catch a ball and, all that stuff. But for somebody, my wife is an example, she kind of played pinball, banging away and all that. But when she saw how intricate it actually was and what it takes to build a pinball machine and, and to play professionally or at that high level, she became more interested in pinball.
Yeah.
And I think the same can happen for our hobby, partly through this documentary.
I think you're right, because a really well-made documentary, it does get you interested in something, right? I mean, I can't even remember how many topics I've started watching something, whether it be a 30-minute show on it or a 1-hour show or a full documentary. Like, and the one that comes to mind, because I'm a sports person, right, was like the Netflix series on Sunderland, the professional soccer team, Sunderland Till I Die, right? Like, getting behind the scenes and understanding just what soccer means in those communities and those villages and everything in England, and understanding like that they really do live and die with those teams. Like, it was hard not to be a fan of that team, even though like before that, watching that, it was like, I don't know who they are. I don't know anything about it. I don't really watch the EPL at all, but it was hard not to be passionate.
Yeah, no, it's like I defy you to watch a good documentary about wine and not want to start digging up your basement and building a wine cellar.
Exactly.
I defy you,
I'll take that bet. God almighty. You look at something low, even though it's not a documentary, like the Queen's Gambit. How many people started to play chess the amount, I've seen the graphs of the traffic on chess.com and Chess about what as a result of that. And millions of people picked up a game that's been around. Chess is easy to learn and impossible to master, but people play it all the time. And a lot of that's because they watch that. So the younger generation of people, which we are now not, did grow up with Madden and NHL, the console games and that. And as you can tell from the amount of retro-looking computer gaming that's out there now, that part of nostalgia has rung a chord. And the other thing is that I wish that the game manufacturers would emphasize is that you can take your fantasy team. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the stock 2020 Oakland A's against the stock 2020 Los Angeles Dodgers. You can play your fantasy team out with cards, dice, or computers.
Right.
That's right.
And I think that's going to be the draw.
And any sports fan, regardless of their age, has their, quote unquote fantasy team.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether it's their actual fantasy team from their fantasy baseball league that they're in, or just like us, I'm actually doing a project now in Action PC where I started something called my all-time favorites league.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, what is it? I have 16 teams. Yeah. 4 divisions, 4 teams each. And basically I didn't overthink it. I just took the baseball history collection and I just drafted my favorite players. So, there are guys in there that, if you wanted to be like, well, he's a better second baseman than he is, you would have taken that guy, but I don't know that guy or I don't like that guy. So I took that guy,
Yeah.
That's how I end up with Felix Mian in my league.
But hey, if he was your hero, then that's the thing.
I was listening to the Topps baseball podcast. I don't know if like the baseball card podcast. You guys listen to
really good ones out there.
Yeah.
I know there are. Yeah, I haven't.
They go over the 1988 Topps podcast. And what they do is they just pull cards from the 1988, set from Topps and they just do a bio on those players, right?
Wait, is that the one where they get athletes to open the packs?
No, they're just working off of like the set, and they'll pull from the Saber bios, and they'll just do like a half an hour to 45 minutes on like that particular player.
Oh wow!
And to your point, like the most recent one was Mickey Morandini, and I was thinking to myself like, yeah, that was always a fun guy to have like on your team.
Yeah,
he wasn't very good, but he was always a fun guy to have on your team. So.
I think it was one of Harry Callis's favorite names to say too. Yeah. Mickey Morandini.
And they covered that too.
I'm sure they did.
Very good. So what do you think are the next? I mean, obviously you're going to try to get this event set up with Ron, and hopefully that'll happen. Anything else that you're going to be doing in the meantime to try to?
Well, yeah. I mean, so here's the logistics, and here's kind of sort of the pitch, I guess. We're going to be setting up a website. So then the question is, how are you going to finance this, right? This is not something, nor does that even exist these days, where you can go to a network like ESPN even, and say, hey, do you want to give me $500,000 to make this thing? It's a really interesting idea. That's not going to happen. The best way for this to happen is homegrown from within the community, with some sponsorship from game companies. And, also as we kind of go through this, with Ron's story, for instance, there may be a foundation that Ron is aware of or isn't aware of that's related to, the birth defect that you were born with that might want to be involved. You don't know.
You want to know how rare my disability is?
Yeah.
Yes.
When I was born 1,000 years ago, okay, in November of 1971, there were worldwide 300 known cases.
Wow. And that's of varying degrees, right?
Right. Because it can affect one limb, it can affect 4 limbs, it can affect everything, and the child wouldn't survive, obviously, if they can't, because it doesn't matter if you break the jaw, if there's no ability to move, they're not eaten.
Right.
So,
So you have, I guess, arguably almost the most
it is
severe form
one
of
of the
it.
rarest disabilities ever. So foundation, no, but just now with technologies
Well,
and
maybe not a foundation specific to that,
right, but as far,
but
but that's
yeah,
how rare it was
yeah.
at the time.
Wow.
I've only met one other person with my disability, and it was not as severe. They were able to walk.
Wow.
Okay.
So yeah, so whether it's going to be Kickstarter, which it very well may be, or Indiegogo or some funding platform, and then we'll make a decision. Also, there's a website called Fractured Atlas, which we use for our show Thespian, which is a 501c umbrella site. So basically, if they approve you, you get 501c status through them. So if we did that, contributions would be tax deductible, which could be a good thing for people. But that gets into some other business stuff that has to be discussed and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, the next step is I'd like to start hearing more stories. So if you're out there listening and you'd like to be a part of this, or you think you'd like to be a part of this, I'd like you to send an email. And I'm debating which of my two emails I think might be better to use Thespian series. So it's THESP as in Paul, IAN, sorry, Thespian series, SERIES @gmail.com. And just say, hey, I'm so-and-so. I heard you and Ron on James's podcast. Here's my story. And let us know how you got interested in the hobby. Whatever information you'd like to give. Or if you're a game designer or a game developer, and, again, email me. And then hopefully James, within the next 3 weeks to a month, maybe at the outside, we'll have a website up and running to be able to take contributions. When you're thinking about something, and this is where somebody like Winnett Yao comes in terms of putting together a budget, again, I think it's important that this not be very, super low budget. I don't think it's not a Marvel movie. We're not talking Marvel money,
But we're not
but
talking public access here either.
right, we're not talking public access either. So now what that number is it 100,000? Is it? And again, you're talking about the cost of the crew, salaries. You're talking about equipment. You're talking about lodging, travel, marketing expenses, and hopefully the community comes together. I mean, it happens with board games all the time. Now there is a difference because when you contribute to a board game, you get the board game. Which is different. But again, if you're somebody who, is passionate about the hobby, likes the idea of, a really well done documentary that, promotes the sport or the hobby rather, but also promotes the humanity of the hobby. I'm still working on titles. I'm toying with Sports Nuts, a celebration of sports sim gaming. But it might be a little too try. I don't know. We haven't figured out a title yet. So if you have an idea for a title, that'd be another reason to email. I mean, again, the more this can be sort of a group effort, I think the better this will be I'm really excited. I think once I landed on the idea of Ron and his story, even if the Red Sox, like I said, if they say no, he can't broadcast, I'm sure we'll find an ending that involves Ron. You know what I'm saying? Whatever that turns out to be.
And one of the things that growing up and you've fallen in love with whatever sport it is. I mean, our generation, it's more baseball. Kids today, it's not baseball. And people thought you were a bit different. People always thought I was a bit different, but people thought you were a bit different when you were talking about whatever it was that excited you, whether it was Dwight Gooden's strikeout total in a particular year or what, if the Patriots win by 30, then the Chargers win whatever it was that got you excited, people just kind of, real life here, Ron, real life. As a kid who grew up in Pontley, Vermont, with a couple other sports nuts kids that we didn't necessarily play these games, and then kind of retreated to playing these games solo in our rooms. The fact that other people are played this stuff, have similar stories to a large degree, I think is kind of a revelation. And we joked about, I don't want this to be a cosplay video of, again, the middle-aged white man with the football jersey on in the Holiday Inn. But I think for a lot of people, it's, you played this stuff too?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I think I happen to think the hobby might be much bigger than we even realize.
Absolutely.
I think, so right now we'd probably all agree that the person in the hobby who gets the most traction on a video is probably Dave Gardner.
Yeah.
Would we agree on that?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what your numbers are, James. I've never seen, with him, I can see because you can literally see the views. Well, actually, no, there's another guy. Actually, no.
Oh, Daniel Evanson.
I was going to say Daniel Evanson. Right? No, actually, it's definitely him.
And then Gardner would be second, I would. So
but Evanson also, he attracts people that may not be in the hobby as much as they are into particularly baseball history or sports history.
He does a lot of video games.
He does a lot of things. Yeah. But my point is, that's just the people who found it. That's just the people that engage on social media. So I believe if we can get the word out past that, we can get even more support. I mean, I picture it opens, if you can close your eyes, it opens with a still shot of Fenway Park. Title card reads whatever, August 11th, 1949, and we hear Johnny Pesky on second. Williams comes to bat, only it's Ron's voice. And then we cut from that. We fade out and we fade up on Ron doing one of his broadcasts from his room. And I think that sets up everything. And that image, I think, is a really powerful, nice image.
I agree. And, going to the events that I've gone to in the last few years, every year, every event I go to, I run into at least one person who is newer to the hobby, right? Who is or who says exactly what you said. I didn't realize all this stuff was going on until just like a couple months ago or something.
Yeah.
So there is definitely more of us out there than are getting connected all the time. Obviously, things like the growth of the internet and Facebook and all these social media places have enabled a lot of us to get to find each other. But before that, like we were all in the closet, basically like playing these games in our basements alone for the most part. So this will be a really good, interesting thing to see come together, and hopefully Mark and Ron, that like this thing really gets a chance to take off, and I'm looking forward to getting some updates and finding out how things play out as it kind of goes forward.
Yeah, hopefully as soon as we're able to launch the website and start being able to take contributions, I'd love to come back on with Ron so we can talk about that and hopefully get the support that we need.
Sounds good. All right, outside of the documentary, what else have you guys got going on as we kind of wrap up here? What can people look to see you engaged in, or what will be going on for you, whether it be hobby related or anything else for the next few months?
Well, for me, I'm working on Thespian. We have 2 full seasons and a partial 3rd season. We have 2 more episodes to shoot to actually finish the series. And if people want to watch that, you can go to Amazon, type in Thespian series, or you can go to Tubi, or actually we have it on a YouTube channel that we don't really promote it there as much. It's there for, but I'm just telling you, you can go there too if you want to watch the show. So there's that. I also, actually, this is sports related too. I just got cast in a play. We just had the first rehearsal for a play called No Mean City, and it's about sort of events that happened in Baltimore in 1966, where you had the Orioles on their first championship run towards the World Series, and there was deep racial divide and violence in the city. So this ties those two things together. For instance, Frank Robinson, who had come to the Orioles from Cincinnati, he had issues where he couldn't find a house. Baltimore is people forget, I think Baltimore is the South.
Yeah.
It's not that far south, but it is the South. And there was a lot of segregation. So I'm playing actually two roles in that. I'm playing the most vicious, horrible, racist that you could imagine. But then I'm also playing the team trainer for the Orioles, who was close with Brooks Robinson and Frank Robinson. So, it's nice that I get to
play
around with two very different characters.
Very cool.
And of course, the hobby is an everyday thing.
Yeah.
I got a strat-based basketball thing going. I got a base. I always have something going.
Nice. And how about you, Ron?
Let's see. We're getting to the meat of our 86 baseball season replay, which I started the annual one. Hard to believe it's year number 8.
Wow.
I cannot believe that I've done this now for 8 years. So much too early to tell. We've just did the first 2 days for opening day. And so this coming week will be the first kind of, the bunting has come down. It's time to get into the brass tacks of that. I'm sure there'll be a football pre-play or two before all is said and done before the big game in February that we cannot talk about being in a bowl. That's super. And I play a variety of different things. Hopefully don't need to do any more tribute games for a while, because if you've ever watched my tribute games, the team that is being honored or the player that's being honored always loses.
Yeah. Ron kills them twice.
Poor Glenn Hole. I'm telling you. At least it was a team he played for that beat him. One of the first ones we did of those was for poor Kobe Bryant. And I did that in Action PC basketball. And I had to yank him out of the game because he was going to foul out.
Oh, man.
I mean, I have become the Mary Tyler Moore parties of tribute games there because it never goes well. So I just wrote a piece for as was mentioned earlier, for Jamie Marshall's Sports Gaming Journal, and I really enjoyed that. This, that, and the other thing, but I'm on 3 days a week with the baseball, and that's the primary thing. John Wise asked me, how do I finish a project? Well, that's how the channel got started, was if I shared the project with you, then there would be a decent chance that the project would get finished because people develop an interest in it along.
That's true,
with
yeah.
And so that was the purpose of that. So
nothing wrong with some accountability, right?
Accountability is huge, yeah.
It's partly what Marc's doing here too, I think. Getting some accountability and getting that documentary moving forward. So I appreciate you both taking some time, and looking forward to hearing more about the documentary. And we'll definitely have you back on as things kind of, make some progress. And, great to see both of you. And thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you, man. Really appreciate it.
And that's a wrap on this week's episode. First, let me thank Marc and Ron for joining me this week to talk a little bit about their documentary that they're going to be working on. And hopefully this all comes together. I mean, I think this would be a really exciting project to really highlight this community, this hobby that we all really enjoy. And as we talked about, I think it can cover some really interesting aspects. And it's important when you're putting together a project like this to really find a human interest story that helps connect everything together. And I think Ron has been just a great ambassador for this community for the last several years, certainly being involved with Digital to Dice, his Retro Sports Network, and just a lot of the different places that he tries to connect with all of you in the community. So pretty exciting stuff. And just thought it was great to get a chance to meet Marc, learn a little bit more about Ron and everything that he has done and throughout his life that was evolved and revolved, I should say, around the sport, our passion for sports. All right. Next week, as mentioned at the beginning, we'll be covering my winter show. Punted it to next week, and rightfully so. I'll be giving you just a nice overview of everything I plan to do in the first quarter of 2026. We'll talk about some of the projects that I've got planned and really go a little bit more in depth into how I'm planning on executing those projects too, to hopefully help all of you figure out a way to execute your projects at home as well. But until then, thanks for listening.